what the nature of your reaction was. So
I think it's consistent that in some circumstances, achieving that improvement in the child's circumstances, perhaps being able to move to a better place, requires that the parents are at least stable. So that some 2-gen strategies are really focusing on helping, if you think about moving to opportunity type intervention, but then the mom's circumstances aren't sufficiently stable to be able to stay in the new location, that's going to undermine the effect. So
it's stable, not necessarily improving, but it's stable. Yeah.
Can I just add a wrinkle? I think Diane is raising a really important point that when we're happily sitting here talking about investing in mobility strategies and investing in revitalization strategies at the same time, and in fact, we've done tiny dribs and drabs of both so far. So I think it's really encouraging that Raj's results show that it's all the wrong pockets and all the wrong timing, but it would pay for itself if we would get serious about this. But the other is, I think there's a lot of room in what we've discussed today for changes in the policies and practices and exclusionary regulations that, as you've said, have broken people's circumstances and their opportunities. And fixing those policies and regulatory regimes, that's hard, but it's not expensive.
What would getting serious about it mean, Margery? Just give us the top 2 or 3 things. If we were to, let's say we convince everybody that matters, we should get serious, what would you be saying we should be doing?
So I'm going to put one very concrete get serious on the table, and that is, I believe that any week now, HUD will be issuing a new rule that's about affirmatively furthering fair housing. So this sounds horribly bureaucratic, but I think it has the potential to be incredibly important. So let me just say a few sentences
a bit more about it.
So for decades, the state and local governments that get HUD funding have been obligated under the law to affirmatively further the purposes of the Fair Housing Act. But for all these decades, the enforcement of that, maybe even the understanding of what it means, has been pretty weak. And under this new rule, HUD is going to provide data and a template so that states and localities that get HUD funding, and that's most states and localities, they will have to identify the factors that are undermining fair housing outcomes, set goals for addressing those factors, and then show how they're going to use their various federal funds like Community Development Block Grant and other stuff to address those barriers. And the way HUD is, the guidance HUD is defining about what they mean by barriers to fair housing and what it means to affirmatively further fair housing is overcome historic patterns of residential segregation, promote more integrated neighborhoods, reduce concentrations of poverty, but also the other thing we've been talking about, narrow the disparities in access to community assets that are associated with neighborhoods. If those regs are effectively implemented, and this wouldn't happen overnight, we're talking decades, but if these regs were effectively implemented over decades, I think jurisdictions all over the country would have some real accountability, some real incentives to start addressing the barriers that have excluded people from opportunity-rich places and denied opportunities to the places where poor people and people of color live. So it sounds very obscure, but I think it could be hugely important.
Perhaps it's important to keep it sounding obscure in order to get it through. Sometimes obscurity is the best political strategy, particularly in this area. I'm going to ask one more question, then we'll open it up, which is essentially what's going on